SDNNYC, first event here at Intuit. This will likely be our home for a while. So if you come to future events, you'll go through that whole process you went through tonight, and this is where we'll be. So it's Unleashing Innovation in 6 weeks, more doing, less talking. Okay, so the quick rundown of SDN, most of you could recite all of these slides by heart, but Barry, Casey, myself, Francesco, and Max, we are the leadership team for SDN NYC. Our goal is to host meetups like this monthly. In practice, if we get to 8 of them, we feel pretty good. Sometimes there are meetups like this. We've done panel discussions. Sometimes we do purely social events. We've had a couple of those recently once COVID restrictions lifted. These are all of our socials where you can find us. The best way to keep track of what we do and when we do it is through our meetup channel. So if you join nothing else, join our meetup group, and that will give you all of the information. You can reach out, you can contact us through meetup. And that's where you can learn about all the events. If you are interested in volunteering, we are always, always, always looking for help. We look for social media stuff if you want to do video recording. If you want to do, when we have it available, people will recap the event, write a small article about it, and we publish it. So many options. If you are interested in being a speaker, or if your company is interested in hosting or sponsoring an event, reach out to us. We're always looking for help that way. We have this new home, but by no means are we locked in here. And like I said, if you yourself are interested in being a presenter or have an idea for an event, let us know. We'll work with you. We're pretty easy that way. So tonight we are meeting and mingling over lovely Mediterranean food, not pizza. We will have our discussion for, I don't know, 30 minutes or so, and then some Q&A and whatever, and it'll just go. And then round about 7:30 or so, you don't have to go home, but you can't stay here. So I will introduce Tucker Fort from Smart Design. This is our 3rd partnership event with Smart Design. They've been great partners with us over the past year. So we're very lucky and thankful to have Tucker here. I will let him introduce himself. While he's doing that, we'll get the computers switched around. And here we go.
All right, great. Well, first of all, thank you to David and SDN and Intuit for hosting the event and also for inviting me to speak. So like David was saying, we have a pretty long-standing relationship with SDN. I think I first got introduced to the organization when the global conference was in New York a number of years ago, and so it was right in our backyard, and it was great to participate, and we hosted some events and dinners during that time period. I've yet to been able to find the time or resources to travel to one of their exotic locations for their global conferences, which they always seem to choose lovely Nordic cities or other European locations. So maybe this year coming up, I think David was saying it's in Helsinki this year coming up, right?
Yes.
What time of year?
First weekend in October.
All right. So sounds very exciting. I'm going to, so just a little bit about myself really quickly before we get into the content. So I'm one of the partners at Smart Design. And my background, before I talk a little bit about Smart Design, is I was originally trained as an industrial designer. So I come from a design background. Currently, my role is focused on overseeing the design capability and the technology capability at Smart Design. I do a lot of project planning, thought leadership, and kind of management of the teams, and trying to constantly evolve how we're working and how we're serving the needs of the projects and client opportunities that we see. I, you know, even though I'm further away from actually designing things today than I was when I was younger, I still love having that designer background and that designer training, because I think that the one thing that's really great about being a designer is that you have to be an optimist. And I feel like that level of optimism really is what can drive you to kind of think about a better tomorrow. And so some of that feeling of thinking that, there's something better that we can find tomorrow is really a great thing to build your career around, because it's constantly renewing and rewarding. So this talk that I'm going to give today is a kind of a slightly extended version of a chat that I did. I remember there's a little feedback right there. A slightly extended version of a chat that I did at the Front End of Innovation Conference, which was hosted in Boston a month ago or so. So a lot of the thinking and work that came into this talk came from looking at the front end of innovation and the process there. So just quickly, a couple of slides about Smart Design. So we are still independent design and innovation organization. We were founded over 40 years ago. We're based out of Brooklyn. Generally, the capabilities we have within the organization focus around design, research, strategy, and technology. And when I say technology, I mean both physical engineering, embedded systems, and then also software engineering. We've won a lot of awards over the years. A little taste of some of the type of work that we do at Smart Design. A lot of it is really upfront insights and innovation strategy. A lot of this is research focused, helping organizations figure out really where to innovate. We do a lot of work that results in physical and digital products. So these are actually designing these beautiful, amazing, exciting, frictionless experiences that people want to engage with. And then we have quite a deep capability around emerging technology and using that as almost an R&D function to help really enable new experiences. And then an aspect of the work that we do is really around training and capability building. So this is helping our client organizations actually elevate their internal capabilities and helping them become sort of best practitioners in whatever they're trying to accomplish. Really exciting news. We've hosted 2 SDN events in the past couple, like 6 months. Has anyone been to Smart Design before yet? So we just opened up a really great, exciting new innovation studio in the Brooklyn Navy Yard, which is we're all really excited about. We're still sort of figuring out how we want to use it, but it is a multi-purpose space that allows us to leverage the space in different ways for research, for events, for collaboration, for heads down work. And so it's really nice to have that asset as a team and as an organization. We have a fantastic prototyping lab, which is really exciting as well. Great meals, and really, really great coffee, which is something that we all love, at least within Smart Design. So what I'm here to talk about today with everyone is a little bit of a pattern that we've been seeing, I would say, over the past 3 years. Some of it comes out of a little bit of a COVID hangover. Some of it comes out with the general contraction of, I would say, budgets and risk tolerance at a lot of larger organizations. But what we've really noticed is that a lot of organizations were struggling to even sort of initiate design and innovation programs because there was a lot of uncertainty around what the outcome was going to be, and there was a lot of different types of challenges that they were facing. And just so you know, at Smart Design, most of our clients are larger Fortune 500 organizations who have established brands and businesses, but at the same time, are constantly trying to figure out what they need to do next to stay relevant. And so as an example, a lot of these organizations are constantly seeing smaller organizations sort of nipping at their heels. Maybe they don't have the same infrastructure that slows them down. They're just hungrier. There's a whole host of reasons. And so that's a challenge a lot of our clients are facing. And then also the other challenge with being a large organization is it's hard to identify the size of idea and opportunities. So if you're a company that thinks about growth in terms of hundreds of millions of dollars, then every idea in an early stage is not going to look like $100 million idea. And so it's really hard for organizations to commit to ideas that might seem small early on in the process. And so because of that, a lot of smaller companies take those ideas and they build them up, and then eventually those organizations just buy those companies, and that's how they do innovation. The other thing is just, within the structure of existing organizations, everyone has their hands in a lot of different things. It's really hard for people to focus and commit to one thing. And so they're constantly putting out fires. They're trying to deal with existing products that need to be updated. They're trying to, they're worried about the next quarter. And so all of these things create a very distracting environment to actually be innovating in. And then what we also are seeing is sort of the over-reliance of using research as a way to sort of help make decisions. And so what we see is a lot of companies spending much more time trying to research or validate ideas instead of actually identifying and developing ideas. And so, they're constantly going to research, often using the wrong methodology at the wrong time, and end up deploying a lot of resources against researching things instead of actually innovating things. And so what we start to see is, and this is, something that's gotten a lot worse over the past couple of years, is that basically teams that are tasked with innovation are basically paralyzed because, when they look at doing a project, the investment dollars look really large. A lot of times the immediate or short-term business impact is not clear. The timing often feels like it's not right. Like, oh, we'll do it next quarter. We'll do it next quarter, and then before you know it, it's been 2 years. And I think there's often a sense within large organizations where if we can just not rock the boat, then that's fine. And so a lot of times it may feel like doing nothing is better than doing the wrong thing. And so all of these things kind of come together to create this perfect storm where I think, there's a lot of pressure on commissioning and starting innovation programs. So when you think about how innovation has typically been done historically, and this is a lot of, I still deeply believe in this process because it works. But the reality is if you have a process that works, and nobody is willing to do it, then it doesn't work. And so, what we have to do is rethink a little bit about how we think about early innovation processes. A lot of the foundations of a traditional, what we would call like a double diamond based approach is, you have a foundational phase, you spend time understanding the current state to really understand where the opportunities and pain points are. You use that research to inform ideas that can create a different future state. You take those ideas into the, you take those ideas out and you sort of build on those and validate those ideas. And then from there, you might move forward to implementation or commercialization. So you get these kind of multiple loops that can get very expensive and can extend out over time. And so when we've looked at this approach and tried to be more innovative in our own approach, we identified some different kinds of speed bumps that I'm going to take you through. But some of the challenges that we've seen over and over again is that the onboarding process can be very long. And so just to get a team up to kind of what I would say is neutral can take time. These multiple design and research loops can be very expensive, especially if you're doing research in person where you need to travel and it doesn't really scale. And then with how distributed teams are right now and how fractured they are, it's really hard for them to actually make decisions and get input and kind of push things forward. And because of that, a lot of stuff never actually gets out into the market. And so there's a lot of challenges with innovation right now. What we did is some of this, what I'm going to share, comes from, I think it's about 5 or 6 projects we've done over the past couple of years where we've been iterating on how we can change how we do things to try to speed things up without compromising quality and impact. And so I'm going to take you through kind of 5 steps that we've been working on. To sort of slightly bring the process to life, I'm going to share little snippets of some work through one of our clients. You won't see too much because a lot of the work is still in progress, but it's still helpful to get a general understanding of the process and context of a particular category or business. This particular client is called Central Garden and Pet. They're probably a really large company that no one's ever heard of, which is like one of my favorite types of clients because it means that they're kind of a sleeper company. But they focus in 2 main categories, which is garden and pet. They've mainly grown through acquisition over their journey, so they haven't really ever built anything up internally on their own. They typically buy small niche garden and pet brands and kind of roll them up. but they are publicly traded and they do over 3 billion in sales, so they're not small. Just to give you a flavor of some of the types of stuff they get involved with, they have a lot of products that are in the kind of lawn care and herbicide category, stuff on fertilizing, a lot of dog and cat products, and then they have a lot of specialty pet products, which is really interesting, you know, reptiles, fish, horses, all kinds of things that many people love outside of New York City. So this is just a little bit of a background of who they are, and you'll see some examples through the steps that will help bring it to life. So the first thing about any time when you're trying to compress the timeline is that part of me feels like, you know, for every week you take out of the progress, you need to spend at least a half a week preparing to do whatever you're going to do. Because when you're sort of thinking about you're launching a rocket, and if you don't have everything straight when you launch, then it's not going to work. And so what we find with this accelerated approach is that you actually need to spend more time planning and getting everyone aligned before you even start. And so a lot of this comes from not necessarily work that we would do as a agency partner at Smart Design, but what our clients would do to really prepare the organization to do this work. So they do a lot of initial planning and making sure everyone is clear on the expectations and making sure that we're focusing on one particular ask that everyone is okay with. And so there's a lot of work that goes into just sort of aligning internal stakeholders before we hit go. And that definitely cannot be overlooked. And then that same thing has to happen on our side of things. So when you're running a very, very tight, fast project, you need to have the right team from the start, and you can't be trading out team members as you go, because if you have to onboard a new team member mid-process, it slows everything down. And so what we have to do is look at the challenge at hand and build kind of a dedicated multidisciplinary team from the start, who they need to have kind of two things. They need to be really good at the expertise they're bringing to the team, but they also have to be really able to efficiently stretch into the other areas of the project, because you need that level of stretch to be able to accomplish the work quickly. And so when we look at a project like this, we're typically trying to identify the right core team from some of our areas of capability. A project for Central Garden would likely have someone representing design, somebody representing research and strategy, and somebody representing brand. There weren't any really hardcore engineering challenges, at least at the beginning of this one. The second point is just about how you get the team up to speed. So, you know, there's a weird duality in my world working in an agency where part of what we're getting hired for is our fresh perspective, because we haven't been working in the category for 10 years. We haven't been, you know, we're not so deep in it that we're restricted by what we know. But at the same time, the last thing a client wants to do is pay for you to become an expert in what they already know. And so there's this kind of duality that we're always facing at the start of a project. And so we've had to try to come up with new ways to accelerate that onboarding process. So it doesn't take 4 weeks, it takes a week. And so you really have to be strategic about how you spend your time. What we've done is kept some of the core aspects of the process, but just been more efficient about how we're using it. So one of the things, you know, I know we could have a whole talk about AI, but that's not what I'm here to do. But at the beginning of a project, it's a really valuable tool that we can use to just get the most foundational understanding of a category, the history of a category, the competitive set, everything that's general baseline knowledge. We can digest and process that much faster than we used to be able to. And the other thing that AI is helping us do, and generally just kind of the state of the internet, is the amount of feedback, first-person reviews, complaints, 5-star reviews. There's so much information online that we can scrub and extract to just start to really dip our toes in some. It's feedback from real users, but we don't have to go do that research ourselves. We can just do we can do it really quickly. We can get all that in. We can figure out why people are complaining about things. We can watch YouTube reviews. We can do all that kind of stuff. So that allows us to really quickly get up to speed. It used to take much longer to do that work. But even though we use all these kind of, I would say, more desk research type tools to kind of get that wide balance of understanding, we still make time for our teams to get really specific. And so um, you know, it's so frustrating when a team is working on a project and they've never actually done the thing themselves. And so it's so important that you save and you protect that. So in this case, we're working on herbicides, and we're also living in New York City, so you have to make time for the team to go out to somebody's house and actually try all the products and really develop that firsthand empathy, because if they don't have that empathy themselves, they can't even have a meaningful conversation with the client. So we feel pretty strongly that that must be protected in this more compressed process. Um, and then we have started to more effectively bring on external subject matter experts it's a little bit easier to recruit them online. And again, they can accelerate our understanding of the category outside of our client's perspective. And so that's another really valuable tool. So these kind of two things between kind of going broad, but still remaining giving that hands-on piece is really critical. And then the third thing, and this is where there's a lot of opportunity to compress things down, is accelerating how we're doing research and how we're thinking about it. So what we've been deploying a lot, and even in projects that are quite physical, is we have actually been using a lot of mobile research platforms to really accelerate our ability to gather feedback and also get feedback across the country very, very quickly. So previously, we'd go to 2 markets, and there was a lot of legwork and planning done. In this project, we use DScout as a platform, but there's many platforms. It doesn't really matter what you use. But it does allow us to really understand the current state very, very quickly. We can design very specific research missions that are they capture the journey in a way that might be harder to do in other traditional kind of IDI, remote IDIs. So we can have people give us tours of their garden. We can have them, it's not awkward to have your smartphone out at a Home Depot anymore. And so they can go into Home Depot and they can take videos of them shopping at shelf. And so we can really, really quickly get a lot of great content. And the content is so rich visually, the audio, everything. It's very, very powerful and compelling. And so we can use that later in the process. And then the other thing that we do is we accelerate the process by combining, this is what I would say, focusing on the current state, but then we also layer in very, very early concepts that are kind of concept stimuli, and we make that part of the mobile diary study. And so we can get really initial reads on some of the early ideas that we've had based on the foundation work that we've done. And so by no means are these ever the final ideas, but they just start to help us understand very, very quickly what resonates with consumers. And I think that the thing that is interesting about doing research on a mobile phone today is that people basically spend 6 hours a day on their mobile phone anyway. So if you can't articulate an idea over a mobile phone, like, they're probably not going to get it at retail anyway. So it's an interesting proxy for research. So by putting these two things together, it allows us to cut out one of the loops that we would traditionally do with, I would say, it doesn't compromise the quality too much. The fourth thing that we've been working on, and we've been iterating on the design of these and how to make them the most effective, is really about how you use really one critical in-person workshop to really anchor the whole project around. And I think that this is interesting in a couple of different ways. So with hybrid remote work and with organizations that are distributed quite widely across the United States, a lot of these teams don't even get together, period. And so it's actually a big effort to get everyone together, but it's really, really worth it. And so what we've found is that by kind of trying to put all of our in-person dollars into one moment and being really thoughtful about how we leverage the time together, we can actually cover a lot of ground. And through iterations of the tools we use and the allocations and how much time we spend on different things, I feel like we've been able to cover 2 weeks of traditional input gathering and feedback and ideation and brainstorming and down selection into one day if you're really strategic about how you put it together. And so the typical kind of general outline for how we cover this time together with the client organization, and this is a multi-functional cross-discipline team on the client side, is we go through the current state that we pull out of the research and our foundation work. We share feedback on early ideas. We often bring in really quick physical models if it's a physical product. And even though they're not great, they just give they give people a tool that helps them talk, actually. We will then ideate and do brainstorming, both kind of initial brainstorming, but then also saving time to build on ideas. And then from there, we actually do some really interesting different down selection kind of voting tools that we've been developing to compress that all down. And so it really helps us cover a lot of ground in a very, very quick time. And then the fifth step, and this is one that is interesting because I think it's easy to think about cutting this step because sometimes a lot of organizations say, oh, like we don't need you to bring the ideas to life. Like just write them in words, we'll get it. You know, it doesn't really matter. But the reality is it does matter. And so you really have to save time to take whatever the leading concepts are or the leading ideas and really bring them to life so that organizations can see the idea in their future, because otherwise they're not going to be motivated to do the next step because you're still asking them to do work to try to envision how this is going to impact their business and their brand. And so we always take time to really bring the ideas to life. It varies based on the category we're working on and a whole host of other variables, but often it's about, spending the time to design really beautiful sketches, bringing the brand to life in the work so that immediately when you bring the brand to life, it's sort of people understand how it's going to impact their business. And the investment you get in this activity at this stage it's not really about, it is about the output of this particular phase, but this is really the tool for the future because it is these assets that allow the work to be socialized internally. They get people wanting to see them. It's what you bring to external partners who you need to commercialize these products. It's what you bring to Home Depot and Walmart or whoever your channel may be to actually get them to want to put this stuff on their shelf. So they really help engage all of the important stakeholders for the next phase. And so what we're really doing is setting ourselves up for success into the future. And then the other thing that's great too is to try to think a little bit about how these concepts can become strategies or scenarios so that the organizations can be thinking about what they want to commercialize in a more strategic manner. And so it breaks their mindset away from what they like to what kind of business do they want to be and where do they want the brand to go. And so starting to build out roadmaps of ideas so they understand how this work can have a lasting value over time. So quickly in summary, with sort of a lot of the work that we've been trying and iterating on, we do believe that, we can go from this more traditional, double diamond, two loop early innovation process, which usually from our experience can take, around 12 weeks, if not longer, depending on how many markets you're doing research in, to something that's a lot faster. We can kind of cut the time in half. Of course, there are some compromises along this process, but if the trade-offs are they're not going to do it or they're going to do this, like it's better to do this because, from our experience, you can talk about stuff forever and a lot of organizations love to talk about it. But if you can create something that's small enough and manageable and something that people can bite off that actually results in the doing side of things, then you have a much higher possibility of impact. So that's where I wanted to wrap. Thanks for listening to my talk tonight, and I'm happy to take any questions as needed. So.
Thank you.
Sure.
It was a great talk. Does anybody have any questions? And I'll come around with the mic because, again, we're trying to get on audio.
Hey, I'm Greg. Great talk. So I see why the need to kind of shorten the process based on what you said, as far as customers don't want to pay for you to become the expert. And I know that smart design, I don't know how long relationships last with some of these clients. So is this a process for a customer that has kind of a smaller budget and wants to do some transformation and might not want a long-term relationship with smart design? I'm just wondering, where do you choose this process versus like a client you have a very long relationship with that they do want to pay you to become an expert so that you could do a longer process and have a longer impact?
Yeah, I think it's, we see we have most of our relationships are very long term, and you develop trust over that period of time. You develop expertise. You leverage each other's strengths, and so, in those types of relationships, we're typically have a more bespoke process that takes advantage of that. The timeline is maybe longer. We may be going deeper. That they may be more sophisticated in their how they think about innovation, or may have larger budgets to do that kind of work. Or sometimes what they're tackling is just more complicated. Like you're not going to solve digital health and wellness for teens and youth for Instagram in 6 weeks. It's not going to happen. But but you could start. And so I think that this process is optimized for, I think, clients who are tipping their toes into the innovation process, or for organizations who are more resource constrained. So even if they are familiar with it, they don't have the types of timelines and dollars that they might like to have. And the other thing that's great about this is sometimes organizations have a hunch about something, and they kind of want to just check it out. And by creating something that's a little bit more accessible, you might do something that you wouldn't typically do. And so we do see opportunities, even with our big established clients who spend a lot of money on innovation every year. They have stuff on the edges that they're like, we're not ready to drop 14 weeks or a couple $100,000 towards, or 300 or 400 grand towards this thing. And so, it still is of value to, I think, to any organization because of that nature of it. It allows you, innovation is always risky. And so it's always a risk reward sort of a calculation. And so if you could have even a small, medium, large sort of mental model, I think it can be helpful.
Thank you. Hi, I'm Victoria again. Thanks so much. This is great. I was just curious from like a project management perspective, who's the one kind of like steering the ship when it comes to these 6 weeks, like making sure that there's that scheduled, all day in-person event? How do you make all of that match up, and how do you keep folks accountable?
Yeah, so it's the teams on these projects. Typically we have a core team that's fully on the smart design side, that's fully dedicated 100% to the project. So they're not working on anything else. So they are accountable in that way. And those teams are typically 2 to 4 people, depending on the size of the project and the capabilities required to pull it off. And then they're partnered with what we call a project director, who is someone who's overseeing multiple projects at the same time. They're about a third on the project. And then they are also partnered with a project manager who's handling a lot of the structural elements of the project, so that the team can really focus on the content and not get too bogged down by some of the logistics. So everything has to come together. Like there's not a lot of room for error. And then also you really need a good partner on the client side, because you need someone on their side who's going to wrangle everyone and make it all happen. And so you need someone who you basically have a texting relationship with to make it all work. So yeah.
Hi, thanks so much for sharing all this. My name's Andrew. I just had a quick question about can you speak to how to shift the conversation from like a profit and ROI towards value and quality? Like in general, I'm sorry, it's a pretty broad question, but it seems to me that a lot of this is like getting these kinds of conversations launched, that profit always seems to be like a hurdle.
Yeah. I think that, most of this work in this type of projects that I'm talking about is typically in the mid to long term type, meaning, this work is not going to influence an ROI next quarter, because of the commercialization timelines. It could in a digital project, but even working in a digital service-based project, like we do this kind of work in digital service type of categories as well. And realistically, that's also not probably going to happen. So I think it's always a challenge, and that's sort of one of the reasons why we started looking at a more compressed approach, because you can make by definition, the outcome is uncertain. anything you can do to reduce the cost profile or the risk profile of the work is going to increase its likelihood that someone might be willing to kind of give it a shot. And so a lot of it is just getting people comfortable with it. And then I think we have seen, because of it takes time for this work to impact like sales revenue, where we try to find ways to create a perception of value earlier in the process. And a lot of times, for example, with this type of work is this, a lot of times this work will go directly to a strategic meeting with a key business partner that will sort of help the brand or business be portrayed in a more favorable light, say with a key retail partner.
But does the like get stuck in that perception of value, perception of like profits down the pipeline, get stuck in like research, right? That business.
I think you can, yeah. I mean, you can get stuck in those loops, and that's was one of the points at the beginning. Is like this, like constant, like, well, let's test it again, and then before you know it, you spent $600,000 testing something that you could have brought to market for $600,000. And so it's like, what did we just accomplish? But I do think that when I talked about spending that extra design time making the concepts, bringing them to life, literally where that can take you is, an example of in this organization is, the client team takes the work to Walmart and meets with the executive buyer and shows them the work, and the buyer's like, I want this on the shelf. Like I'll put this on the shelf, next spring if you guys can get it to me in time. And so that creates an external validation, which then can like accelerate the work, I would say. But it is a challenge for sure. So. Yeah.
Hi, my name is Chaz. You mentioned.
Yep. All right.
Okay. You mentioned picking people wisely. How exactly do you pick these people that are going to be on these teams?
I mean, it comes for us. We have a pool of people who work at the company, so we're trying to identify the right recipe of people who have the right types of strengths. But I do think it comes this type of project because of the accelerated timeline and because you only have one person representing each kind of core area of expertise. You usually need someone who has some level of expertise in that project, in that area. And so typically the team is a more senior-based team. And so that is usually in the 4 to 7 years of experience, depending on what category we're working in. So that's one part of it. And often they've gone through different aspects of a similar project, even if it's slower before. So at least they're familiar with some of the areas of focus. But the great thing about an organization like SMART is even if we have a team who's not done everything, there's always somebody else at the organization they can reach out to get support or help. So.
Hi.
Hi.
I'm wondering how much the shorter process is also related to the current economic situation, and with that also the question kind of how do you use this for new business and then also follow up on these 6 weeks to build client relationships?
I think like any new process, it's born out of the current state of affairs, which is what causes all of us to change. And so I think that's where it comes from. But I think, if suddenly the general economic state shifts in a more positive way, I don't know that suddenly we're going to go back to spending, 16 weeks doing these types of programs again. So I do think that there's value in this type of work. What we've seen is that we've seen this, again, be a really great way to start a relationship with a client. And then we've seen clients who do it once for one category, and they say, oh, that was great. We're going to take a few ideas out of that work. We're going to put it on our innovation roadmap, which for a lot of times for smart design, that means we're going to be designing those things. So that's great because we get a kind of a longer tail of work off of this initial work. And then they say, oh, we also want to look at a whole nother category. Like we'd love to take this and look at pet grooming and like what can we do in pet grooming? And so, you know, again, because it's a little bit more manageable, you can sort of say, oh, let's kind of take a few bets and then even we can see the outcome of those bets and then make a decision. So it's actually been, I think it's been, you know, obviously I'm like, part of this is about, you know, what we do to try to sell work to our clients, but I truly do believe personally that it's resulted in good work that leads on to even better work. And I think it is an effective tool. So, yeah.
Hi there, thanks for
Hi.
your talk. I'm curious to know if you've tried co-creation or co-design methods with customers or end users and what value that might bring to this particular process at this particular stage in a relationship with a client.
So we do a lot of co-design work, and I'm a huge fan of co-design. And I think that in a traditional, longer process, in a category like some of the categories I was describing, we would definitely recommend doing it. But I think that what we've found is that it's harder. A lot of our clients are wary of it who have never gone through it before. And so it can be quite a hard process for them to get their head around. Like, oh, why do we want, like, you guys are the experts. Why do we need to, like, why are you going to go talk to our consumers and have them help you solve the problem, you know, whatever. And so I think it's a little bit hard to sell, and it does take time because we have to, what's surprising in the co-design process is the amount of time it takes to design the co-design experience. And so you end up, it's its own design project, basically. It's like, what are the stimuli going to be? How are we going to make them? What's, you know, it can be quite complicated to do it right. And so if you're not going to have enough time to design the co-design process properly, then you're not going to get good output. And then also, if you're not going to have enough time to do it in the right market with the right people, then it's not going to work. But I have two projects that I'm involved with right now where I could, like the co-design process, we had time to do it right, and the output has been amazing. And there's no way we would have gotten to the output without the process. There's absolutely no way. So I'm a strong believer of it. But again, if it's co-design or nothing, I would do this in a second. So. I think is that.
Oh, great. Hello. So you mentioned obviously like the project like this, the dream is that after 6 weeks, so like great idea, perfect, and it goes off to get built. But I'm curious, what are some of the other value you've seen out of a project like this? Whether it was, well, we shouldn't do that, or you know what those kind of fringe benefits might be sometimes.
I mean, I think like any innovation or design project, especially the way that I think they should be run, is that you get the process itself, the project, you get two benefits. You get the quality of the output, which should be in service of the business, and then you get the journey of the project, which should be in service of educating the organization and the people within the organization around best practices for innovation. And so you get, you know, you do work towards a situation where they can take on more work of their own. So there's kind of a capability aspect to it, which is really important. And then I think, you know, I always say this, and I think it's true, but like, who doesn't want their company to be innovative, and who doesn't want to work with companies that are innovative? And so anytime an organization is outwardly promoting that they're investing in innovation, it has two significant business impacts. Number one is existing talent and talent you're trying to hire are going to be more interested in working there. And two, any other business organizations that you do work with to accomplish your goals as a business are going to think more highly of you. And so it has a networking effect, I think, that affects the overall perception of the business in a very positive way, both for people who work there and for the people who work to support that business outside of it. Yep, one more.
Thank you for giving a talk. My question is how often, because it's such a fast process, how often are you like in communication with the client? Like, are you checking in like multiple times a week, or is it like?
We do like a weekly with the very small core team. And I think the other thing that's really important about this, which I should have said, is there's no way you can deliver a presentation every week because that takes half the week. And so with a project like this, there are two critical touch points that require the team to prepare. It's the workshop and it's the end phase. Other than that, it is like, what are the blockers like, what are the questions we have that we need to know from the business to do our job? Or what are the blockers we have that are getting in the way of us doing our job? And so, I think when you do a weekly call or check-in with a sponsor, or whether it's internal or external, the danger can be that you spend all your time preparing for that, and then you never actually do the work. And so you have to really hold back, and you have to set that expectation at the start and tell them, listen, just so you know, and the other thing we do is we are very transparent. We say, here's the link to our Miro board. You can open it any time. Go ahead, poke around, whatever. We don't really care. But we can't spend time, creating a deck for your boss every week because they want to micromanage the process. It just doesn't work. So,
I actually have a question
Yeah.
about your research process. You were talking in one of the slides about, getting into their YouTube channels and, doing customer research in that way. Do you find that to be faster or more effective for this process than their own internal feedback mechanisms? Assuming that they have them.
Yeah, I think if they have it, it's another input. So
Okay.
if they have a
VOC or
database,
something.
or if they have, other, someone who represents that. Yeah, I mean, I think it's kind of, we'll take whatever we can get our hands on, but, at the same time, I think what's important is you can quickly get bogged down by 100-page internal decks that are just, it needs to be inspiring. And that's the thing about what you read a 5-star review on Amazon, you watch like a YouTube video, 1-minute review, there's a lot of passion that goes into those things that people say. And there's something very inspiring and motivating about that, which is very different than, I think the state of the category through these 100-page decks. It's too much to process in such a short time. So, all right, good.
One more
All right,
question.
one more.
Since everyone's done, can you speak a little bit more about future state and how you first come to whatever those insights might be, and then how you applied them to ideation for current state improvements or innovation?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's like I said, and like David said, we use that rapid onboarding sort of process at the beginning to quickly immerse ourselves in the current state without doing any primary research yet. We use that work to fuel early ideation, like an early round of ideation, combined with like the stuff I said about we go out and we do the stuff ourselves, we do the audits, and then so we kind of use that first touch point to develop those early ideas. And then when we go do the diary studies, we spend some of the time understanding their current state, so that gets richer. Our current state understanding gets richer, and then we feed them our early future state ideas, and then they give us feedback on those at the same time. So we're kind of like staggering it and then bringing it together at the end in the process. So, all right, great. Well, thank you again for all the questions, and thanks for coming.
Yeah, thank you, Tucker. Really appreciate it. It was a great talk. And thank you all for coming. One last announcement, as Tucker alluded to earlier, I would be remiss if I didn't mention that in October, we have the SDN Global Conference in Helsinki. It is a hybrid conference, so it is in person. It is also virtual. If you go to the SDN website or any of the SDN social channels, you can find information. I am on the organizing team, so reach out to me directly if you have any questions. I will be in Helsinki, so if you're coming, let me know, and all of that. It's the 3 days, first Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday of the first week of October. Workshops are on Wednesday, and then the conference itself is on Thursday and Friday. So again, thank you all for coming. Really appreciate having you here, and we'll see you again in a month or so.
Great. Thanks, David.